psychologist argued sociopathic personalities dominated the schmaltzy leadership, noting that Germans had been raised in a culture which prioritized deference to authority. Does that sound familiar? There are many studies about how Americans have been raised in authoritarian households. And that's why giving deference to an authoritarian male seems very familiar. Don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about. This isn't up for discussion, right? Does any of this sound familiar? We have been bred to follow an authoritarian leader. Just saying. To follow, prioritize deference to authority over reason, and it created blind obedience to a pathological leadership. That's you, MAGA. Partridge, another Nuremberg psychologist, had earlier argued that groups of people acting together could at times and pervasively be collectively sociopathic, being deviant or pathological in their motivation and behavior towards one another, both as part of a group and in social relations between groups. Kelly, chief psychiatrist at Nuremberg, concluded fascism was a socio-cultural disease, one where a conducive social environment had created a social pathology. If you think you're doing something novel, MAGA, you're not. You've never had an original idea in your head. You're just a sheep following a malignant narcissist who's mirroring his favorite people.
Just think about what Felice has just broken down, and we've got more to cover here. Just think about how she's broken this down for us, right? The idea that the victimhood card that narcissists play, we all know narcissists in our lives. We all know them, right? A sort of an underlying commonality between all narcissists is that they'll play the victim card. It's part of the game. Who plays the victim card more than Donald Trump? No one. Sure, there may be people we don't know about that might, but he gives us an example every single day. Weaponized government. No one's been investigated more than me. Everybody hates Trump. Journalists aren't fair to me. The courts aren't fair to me. The judiciaries aren't fair to me. Members of Congress aren't fair to me. Everything becomes about him portraying himself as the victim. And what has that done? He has used that.
I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
Did it come back?
Yeah, now I can hear you. For a second, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I got a phone call. He's used that victimhood as fuel to bring in other people who feel like they've been aggrieved. That's a dangerous combination. Again, the tyrannical government that the right has been fear-mongering about for years is the government we currently have. An effective form of strategy by the right to condition their voters that they are all victims because of what we're discussing this morning. And it's allowed capitalism, this economic narcissism system that we're in, to prop up the people who are taking advantage of their voters, their loyal voters. Let's suppress labor. Let's not pay people more. Let's cut benefits so that the rich can enrich themselves. Complaints from the right that the economic elite are out to get us, and yet they're voting for it. It's unbelievable. This will be studied forever. Sorry, please.
I'm saying, MAGA, you never had an original thought yet. Trump is just mirroring Hitler, who, by the way, came to America to mirror our concentration camps. You think Hitler invented concentration camps? No, America did. He came here and toured them, right? That's how we got rid of indigenous people. You think America created concentration camps. Hitler had a picture. The only person to get a shout out in Mein Kampf who was American was who? Henry Ford. Hitler had a picture of him behind his desk. We are the originator of fascism and hate and the erasure of minority groups. And more importantly, what I want to point out is while you are in a shared fantasy with a malignant narcissist that you're a victim, the ultimate irony, the ultimate F you to MAGA is that you are being robbed by the people, the leaders you are in that shared fantasy with. Brown people don't have your money. Immigrants are only helping you retire. They're only supplementing the gross domestic product. You are actually biting off your nose to spite your face by mass deporting brown people. That's the truth, but you'd have to, that's another live. We don't have time for that today. I could take you through an economic study of how ludicrous that is. But the real people who are robbing you, who have your money, are the people that you are going to the mat for, that you are in this shared fantasy with, that CJ's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Someone said they disagree. You're welcome to come up and explain why.
And keep in mind that, you know, the Yahtzees almost idolized American racism. In some cases, they thought even that Jim Crow might have even gone a little bit too far. So there's a model that they use to suppress their society with crimes against humanity, of course, that we discussed. So here we are, a model to suppress voices of resistance. And I'm glad you said what you said. Democracy works so because people can question government and authority, because we can question what they believe to be the truth. If you're not gonna use your voice for resistance, then we don't have a system. Our founding fathers literally, after we went through the Constitution exercise last week. Think about the rights granted under the First Amendment: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to petition grievances, and freedom to peacefully protest. They built it in because they wanted the constituency to do it. So when we use our voices to do those things, our government tells us, no, we're not going to let you. Illegal activity. Can't use your voice. The press is illegal. That is completely, again, just because you don't use the word feelings doesn't mean you're implying feelings. It is a system that was built to benefit the people, a government of and by and for the people. And when we resist, now we're told that we're radicals. Felice is a radical leftist because, God forbid, she would present facts to counter an argument, laying out malignant narcissism. Here we are. Economic narcissism, capitalism, especially corporate capitalism. I still believe in entrepreneurs, but they can't function in our society today.
But that is the advent of neoliberalism, which that has nothing to do with liberal values. Neoliberalism was the move towards privatization, towards corporate monopolies, right? Like that is, it's a conservative movement. It's Reagan. I talk about this all the time, and MAGA fact check me. If you can do statistical analysis, and I keep saying this, AI can do it for you, so you can fact check me. Since the advent of, don't worry, just don't tax billionaires and corporations, it'll trickle down to you. $50 trillion between 1980 to 2020, 22. It didn't trickle down. It trickled straight up. $50 trillion since we had to hear the irony of trickle. Don't worry. Just let rich people off the hook.
Fine. It's totally fine. Yeah,
they'll trickle down to you poor folks. Don't worry. $50 trillion has trickled straight to the top of the economy.
What's happened just since the stock market? What's the number? Like $6 or $7 trillion of wealth has transferred just since the stock market's crashed, since the economy, or since the inauguration? I think it's like $6 or $7 trillion of wealth has transferred. Yeah, just in this short amount of time.
Where Trump manipulated the markets and said, the day where he repealed some tariffs.
That's
so
right.
much, like just his DJT stock, he made 400 something million.
Good morning.
On my live today, I'm gonna talk about the crypto grift. Like,
oh yeah, that's
what is
crazy.
Qatar? Just $2 billion was just invested. Yeah. And if you don't understand, it doesn't matter what the value of Trump's meme coin is. He's making money off the processing fees.
Correct.
These are direct bribes going to the president of the United States.
Good morning, Edward.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Doing okay. What's on your mind?
So I remember back after September 11th, Bush II sent out a bunch of stimulus checks. Wasn't that kind of a break from neoliberal economic Milton Friedman school policy and put money in people's pockets, more of a Keynesian kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, you could perhaps make that
And are you
argument.
talking about after the collapse of what are you referring to?
After
What
September
year?
11th, they gave us stimulus checks. And it was
Yeah,
also
well-
like an implied admission that Keynesian economics really boosts the economy and not the Milton Friedman neoliberal school.
And actually, thank you for saying Milton Friedman, because I will say this, when I hate saying neoliberalism, because then people are automatically like, oh, liberals. No, yeah, Milton Friedman is probably, if we could identify Margaret Thatcher, Milton Friedman, they are the father of neoliberalism. That is correct. Like, this is Milton Friedman's privatization, capitalistic monopoly. Absolutely. But
Yeah, and
you're saying that pumping, like, this is my opinion on what you're saying. You're saying, like, do stimulus checks prove Keynesian economics is valuable? No, I don't necessarily think so. I think what is happening and what we've seen since 1980, like I was just saying, 50 trillion has been concentrated at the top of the economy. And then we can look at capital gains taxes. If we're taxing, like making money on money, right, at a lower rate than we're taxing wages, that is how money is staying at the top of the economy. And so since money is concentrating up there, we have extreme poverty and desperation due to different situations growing at the middle and bottom of the economy. And I love how delusional libertarians will be like, oh, it's the Fed, they're printing money. No, that is the distraction, right? The distraction is, oh man, the reason we're printing money is because it's all concentrating up there. It's not recirculating. We're all being robbed. And then they're like, shit, people don't have enough to like pay rent. Let's give them a little check and give them some false hope.
Yeah.
So Edward, I'm just curious, were you against the stimulus checks that were sent out post-COVID?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And that's another one. So they realize that the velocity of money deep down in their hearts is what props up the economy, the base spending and not giving tax cuts.
But they don't want to give up theirs.
Oh, they don't want to give up theirs.
Yeah. No, and I agree, but here, I agree with you, but I want to say this, like the reason for the infusions of capital into the economy, and in my opinion, and again, I've taken 3 college economics classes and then I've read like hundreds of economic studies since, but I'm not declaring myself an expert. But the reason for those desperate infusions of capital into the middle class, they are more because the lesson from the Great Depression was without huge, quick infusions of capital. That is why the Great Depression devastated. When they didn't bail out failing industries, when they didn't infuse the economy with capital, it compounded upon itself. So that's why, like in 2008, when you saw them bail out the banks and recognize like, oh shit, we have to infuse the economy with immediate capital. It's the lesson from, like you're saying, from Keynesian economics, the lesson of the Great Depression is without immediate injection of capital into the US economy, this will compound on itself and drag on.
Yeah. I just thought the stimulus check after September 11th and again through C-19 was an attempt to put money in consumers' hands because consumer spending from the bottom up economy instead of a top down was an implied admission that Keynesian actually drives the economy and not Milton Friedman school and supply side.
I think, well, there was some studies done, and I remember economists specifically after the recession in 2008 that they did not fuse enough capital into the hand of consumers. Sure, they bailed out banks because they kind of had to, but I think that was a lesson learned and I think that led to some decisions made about how we need to put money back in the hands of consumers.
Someone in the comments is saying it wasn't after 9/11. Yeah, after 9/11, we got stimulus checks by Bush.
I don't remember that, but
we did.
It's a while ago.
I mean, it was a while ago, but we definitely did. I'm sure somebody can look it up. We got stimulus checks by Bush after 9/11.
I'm looking it up now.
I'll wait a sec.
But I want to say, like, any stimulus infusion into the economy, yes, but that is the Band-Aid. Like I always say to libertarians, they'll, Bless libertarian hearts. Well, and they're not real libertarians. They're fake libertarians. Because if you're voting for the Conservative Party claiming to be a libertarian, then you're delusional. But they'll always say, it's the Fed. It's the Fed. They're printing money. They're printing money. It's not. You have to keep following the money. Why do we need to print money? Why is it money recirculating? It's the concentration of wealth. It's the transfers of wealth. Like you're saying, the C-19 checks, one of the largest transfers of wealth happened during COVID. And then there was a lack of circulating capital, and we printed money to fuel the economy, which we did recover the best in the G7. But yeah, we need to tax the money out of the top of the economy.
We do. Absolutely.
So Edward, I don't see anything to corroborate your story. In fact, I see two things that contradict it. In the months after, nearly after 2,800 people lost their life in the terrorist attack, I saw an influx of emergency funding, but not stimulus checks.
I'm pretty sure we got stimulus checks within a year or a little bit more after 9/11.
No stimulus checks were not given. The Bush administration implemented a $40 billion emergency response package and primarily focused on disaster relief, emergency assistance, and low-interest disaster loans for businesses. There was no broad distribution of checks.
All right, I must be mistaken. I know we got stimulus checks at some point.
But we didn't, though.
Someone's saying I might be thinking of 2008.
2008. That's when the stimulus
that's what I was
happened.
saying. That's when I mentioned that earlier. We got some then for sure, but not deep enough is the issue. So it's okay.
Definitely not deep enough.
That was the second largest recession since the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. And what we learned from the Great Depression, when you don't aggressively infuse the economy with capital, and I'm not defending the way in which we bailed out banks, because what we learned from then was through deregulation. When we bailed out banks, what happened to it? It went to golden parachutes for CEOs that have a high rate of psychopathy, and and then stock buybacks. Like, did that actually go to where it should have gone inside corporations? Absolutely not. Same thing within COVID. Stimulus checks that went to businesses. Did that go to the employees who needed that? Or did that go to stock buybacks and the rich getting richer? Like, we need to regulate the way we bail out businesses. But yeah, like, that is what you're seeing when we infuse the economy with capital quickly. Like, I took an entire college course on the Great Depression and the economics and the lessons we learned from it. And that's why you see these huge infusions of capital.
At the same time, after 2008 and C-19, it's almost like a new paradigm business model with corporations realizing that these minor crashes or even large crashes, they can consolidate capital by buying up the market when it drops.
Yep. Yeah. The people who can acquire capital are the people who have capital.
Exactly.
The only thing we found was, thank you to my team, was the Economic Growth and Tax Relief Reconciliation Act of 2001, but those weren't stimulus checks. That was a tax rebate that we got, but they're not stimulus checks. So you might have been thinking about 2008.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And people are saying, we got a $325 check in our taxes, federal taxes, but it was kind of meant for like a
check.
stimulus.
It was a rebate. It was
rebate. Yeah. When I always say check, I mean our refunds from my taxes.
Yeah.
I agree generally with what you're saying. Like the lines of logic you're on, I agree with. And I think like the COVID-19, like the lesson, and I'm saying the nefariousness of corporations, what we learned during these recessions and crises, what did they learn? And not what we learned, but what did they learn? Price fixing, right? Yeah. Capitalize off a crisis and price fix. Keep prices high for longer. And where are we seeing that now? The egg industry. If you haven't seen, I invite everyone to look up. It's been exposed now. The math, the statistical analysis is there. Like, hiding behind the bird flu and groups of huge egg producers using that to artificially elevate prices. Profits have never been higher in the egg industry.
Sure. They always learn what we're willing to pay for products when they raise the prices like that on some emergency.
Hey, guess what? We keep paying. Edward, thank you for jumping in. Jumping in today, friend. I appreciate you. You got it. See you later.
I followed you, Edward. Nice to meet you. Nice brain. Keep it going.
I think somebody's pointed this out, and I was just thinking this, Tiffany. We print money because it doesn't end up in the hands of the people that it needs to end up in hand. It stays at the top. And by the way, the 2001 tax rebate checks in response to an economic slowdown exacerbated by the 9/11 attacks. Congress passed the Economic Growth and Tax Relief Reconciliation Act of 2001. This legislation provided tax rebates to eligible taxpayers, $300 for single filers, $500 for single parents, and $600 for married couples filing jointly. These rebates were advanced payments of the new 10% income tax bracket and were distributed to taxpayers who filed their 2000 tax returns. So it's part of their return, which, again, good thing, but not enough. And again, there goes.
Well, and what's another one? Like, I recently read a statistical analysis on the oil. Trump continues to lie that gas prices are the average. It's like 197 or something. That's a lie. The national average is like mid threes or a little bit lower than that. And Trump keeps lying about gas prices. But the more fascinating thing is not about Trump lying about gas prices. It's about what gas stations are doing to offset lower convenience store sales. They are artificially keeping the price of gas high, right? If you're, when recessions hit, people are going to buy fewer chips or things they used to pay for. So now we see people artificially keeping the price of gas at pumps higher. And and I'll say this because that guy we talked to, Navy guy, he was like, Kamala wasn't a good candidate. I'm here to tell you, if you believe Kamala Harris was not a good candidate for president, then you have a lot of work to do, a lot of deconstruction, pound for pound. If you had never seen her face or heard her name, she was one of the top 5 most qualified presidential candidates of all time. Period.
If not the most. You could make the argument,
I could make the case. I could easily win in a debate to say Kamala Harris was the most qualified presidential candidate. I could make the same argument for Hillary Clinton.
Totally.
But I mean that genuinely. So I'm saying if you, and this is my advice to you, MAGA, when you show up in debates, if you want to say that, then you have more work to do to deconstruct. It's factually untrue. And what we're facing now is not just a corrupt president who's exhibiting signs of malignant narcissism, but also a corrupt president that is being bribed by corporations to create corporate monopolies and manipulate price structures so that we will forever pay more. So profits remain exponentially high for shareholders, for the billionaire class. That's the situation. And that is what Kamala Harris unequivocally campaigned on.
Exactly.
Period.
I mean, big picture on this. Government exists because, by and large, corporations in the private sector don't do the right thing. There's this argument that could be made for universal health care, right? That if we could trust our employers to circulate the money that they make to guarantee health care for their employees, we wouldn't have to have the conversation about universal health care. And you can use every possible program. You can talk about SNAP benefits. You can talk about all these things, paid family leave. Government has to step in because corporations are not altruistic. They're not going to be doing these things. So people say, let's allow corporations to provide subsidies to healthcare for their employees. I would say we've tried that and they don't do it. They are paying for yachts and boats and guaranteeing
stock buybacks, golden parachutes, C-suite packages. And like I said, the average rate of psychopathy in the U.S. population is 1%. In C-suite executives, that's CEO, etc. It's 3.5%.
And I remember when I got promoted to be a C-suiter, I was only in the position for less than a year because of what you just identified. It's like, this is nuts. I don't want anything to do with this. And it just became a soul-sucking enterprise. My point is that people have these debates about how we shouldn't be punishing corporations. And I'm like, we are not punishing. They have every possible economic advantage there is. So we advocate for universal health care. People say, well, allow corporations to do it. Well, they don't do it. I understand they have a responsibility to their shareholders. I get that. I totally understand that. And I get that. That's how the system works. But the fucking system is broken. So the fact that we have to have these conversations about economic narcissism is because our corporations are not out for us. $50 trillion, friends. What's the date since 1980? Is that right, Felice?
Yes, to 1980 to 2022.
$50 trillion in money that has stayed at the top and has not circulated. The model of
not stayed at the top,
economics
transferred from the middle and lower classes to the top.
To the top. That's right. That's right.
That's what I'm trying. We have the amount of economic power we have left is so little, and they are literally trying to take it from us right now. We are going back to feudalism. And like, this is, if I can impress one thing, it's just understand why the French Revolution happened, right? It was, people were serfs, right? We were in a feudalist system, there were kings and queens and the aristocracy, right? Mm-hmm. There were royals. And then there were people who were serfs. We worked the land and we didn't own anything. The kings and queens owned it all. And like for working ourselves to death, they would give us some scraps to stay alive. That was the agreement. And the French Revolution was about this idea of capitalism, of enough of the kings and queens. We all want to have upward mobility. Let's all be able to take our apples we grow to the capitalistic market, to the town square and sell them. And I want you to understand, if you want out of this narcissistic shared fantasy, malignant narcissist fantasy Trump has us all in, or MAGA in, understand that never died, right? That's all Marx is supposed to be a bad word. All Karl Marx ever said was, hey, I agreed with all those values that the French Revolution fought for. It's just when you do the statistical analysis, it just turns out all those kings and queens, they just go by another name now, and that's capitalists. And they're still amassing and stealing all the wealth. And I think I'm into rights for workers. That's all Karl Marx ever said was like, hey, I see all these union laborers and artisans who are working really hard, and I think we should all share in the profits. And
what a novel
Marxism
concept.
Spread faster than Christianity in Western civilization and Eastern civilization in Asia. Xi Jinping used Marxist values to lift millions of people out of poverty. Now, are they still an authoritarian capitalist society? Absolutely. But he understands, he was steeped in Marxism. And that's all Marx was ever saying was, hey, the French Revolution, it promised a lot of things, but all these kings and queens, they just go by another name now.
They just moved it to something else. Good morning, Meow. How are you today?
Hello. I'm good. I'm generally friendly, but I do disagree with you on one thing. Okay. I do not think our system is broken. I think it is doing exactly what they intended it to do.
Oh, that's fair. Interesting way to look at it. It's broken for the majority. It works perfect. It works perfect for the 1%.
But I think it's working how they want it to.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I mean, obviously, the system itself is without question broken, but the people that are in position to be able to take advantage of it are loving it. It's just what they want.
Oh yeah, it definitely does hurt people like all three of us, but they don't care about us.
No, they certainly don't. They certainly don't. I thank you for that perspective, Meow. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Appreciate you. You too.
Bye,
see you later. I think I've talked to. Okay, I've got Navy Vet.
Hey, is this your backup? I'm following you.
Navy Vet. How are you today?
Yeah, I was listening to y'all, and I agree. It actually started in the 80s, because if you remember, for the 80s, like 85 was when the price of gas went over $1. And before that, they were actually for the people, for the workers, and people were living well. And then all of a sudden the 80s hit, Reaganomics, and everything went downhill from that. And that's when Harris just thought they had a footing in. But then Reagan woke up and said, this don't work, and tried to stop it. And that's why it spent 50 years to slowly work it in, and that's where we're at now. But I agree with everything y'all are saying, and what she said is true, too. It's working for them, not us.
I remember my dad.
Well, obviously, it's working for the 1 point, and not even the 1%. Because if you understand the 1%, I mean, it's less working for it's the 0.1% are cleaning up. Of course, that's the point. We're being robbed, and not by brown people.
Yeah, in the 80s, my dad owned a convenience store, and I remember the big debate about cigarettes going over $1. Everybody was convinced that once cigarettes hit $1 a pack, nobody's going to buy them anymore. And here we are. So that becomes, and I've talked about this before, about the entitlement of the American consumer. We expect to have things when we have them. We complain about prices, but guess what? We still buy the shit. We continue to spend. So that's why when even during the times when you complaints about price gouging and everything else, we complain about the prices, but we don't do anything to change our spending habits. We literally, now we're told by the president that we shouldn't be able to have $30. We should only have $2, and it's okay that those $2 will be more expensive. But to your point, maybe Vet, I appreciate that perspective, friend. How's it going otherwise? Good.
It's going good. Otherwise, yeah, everything's working out for me for now. We'll see what happens when the year comes to an end.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you for being here, friend. Thanks a lot for your perspective on stuff. Have a good day. Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for the gift. Love you, Navy Vet. You're the best.
We've got about 20 minutes to go, Felice. Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of cover off on? I mean, where are we in that amazing diatribe?
I had many more things. I just wanted to, let me find my place, because like I said, most of this is derived. I want to talk about Jimmy Carter. Like, Jimmy Carter gave a speech, right? Mm-hmm. We all do. He was he was only president for one term, and like one of his in July 1979, he gave a crisis of confidence speech where he was basically warning of the rise of group narcissism, right? Of psychopathy, of malignant narcissism inside politics. In the 1979 Crisis of Confidence speech, Jimmy Carter stated that America was confronted with both a moral and spiritual crisis that presented a fundamental threat to its democracy. It was a crisis of confidence, specifically a loss of confidence in the future that was threatening to destroy America's social and political fabric. Too many people had become self-indulgent and obsessed with consumption to the point that a person's identity was no longer defined by what they do, but by what they own. And that's the truth. Look at Donald Trump. Has he really accomplished anything, done anything? Is he overly educated in anything? We now live in a society by grifting, right? What you have matters, not how you got it, not what you know, status, not the values by which you live by. Carter was making the important point that America was at a turning point in its history and warned there was a need to face the truth, to change from the present course of self-interest and fragmentation of society based upon a mistaken idea of freedom as an individual right to grasp toward some advantages over others. Such a outlook of constant conflict between narrow interests could only cause chaos and end in certain failure. Carter hoped to rekindle America's sense of unity and restore confidence in the future. This is the point, right? Individualism has killed us all, right? The belief that you're a temporarily embarrassed millionaire is how MAGA remains in the shared fantasy with Donald Trump, when all mathematics, all statistical analysis, all data, all facts say that Donald Trump and other billionaires are forming an oligarchy and robbing MAGA. But they're in this shared fantasy that any day now, it's coming. As long as I stay in this sociopathic reality with a malignant narcissist, I'm going to be a millionaire, even though it's mathematically impossible.
Yep, Doge checks. Just use that one. They were convinced they were going to get Doge rebate checks from all the waste, fraud, and abuse that was found in our government. And of course, we knew that wasn't going to happen. I think they were supposed to come out on February 30th. We're long past that deadline now. But that's another promise. Promises made, promises not kept, right?
God, don't even say that. God, I hate her.
I know. I wanted to read this real quick because there's a why Trump supporters won't change their minds. It's not because they're all stupid. It's not because they're all evil. It's because they've been psychologically hacked. People under authoritarian influence often genuinely believe they're thinking for themselves. That's how powerful mind control can be. High control leaders use undue influence, a form of manipulation that bypasses logic and hijacks identity. They don't need to convince you with facts. They just need to make you feel like you belong and everyone else is the enemy. When you can't trust the media, when friends are sheep and enemies are traitors, when your leader is the only source of truth, you stop questioning and start clinging to certainty, no matter how harmful it is. This is exactly how cults operate. They isolate, distort reality, and turn loyalty into a survival instinct. That's why yelling facts doesn't work. It's not about information. It's about identity. And I think we experienced that a little bit earlier today when someone was emoting and claiming that they weren't emoting.
I think this is, I love this quote, like Lindner, who was another Nuremberg psychiatrist, believed World War II may have stopped fascism temporarily, but it hadn't stopped the disease in capitalism, which had caused it.
Wow. Say that again, one more time.
Lindner, who was a psychiatrist during the Nuremberg trials, believed World War II may have stopped fascism temporarily, but it hadn't stopped the disease in capitalism which had caused it, the contagion of psychopathic behavioral traits, being a result of conformity to the conditions of 20th century society, eroding the individual ego, whereby people lose their separate identities, MAGA, that's you, merging for security with others into groups of herd-like mass people, which sets the direction of activities. Mass people are more easily stupefied toward submission to persons or ideas of authoritarian character, falling easily under the influence of a psychopathic leader who arouses the latent syndromic psychopathy of others by catering to their worst sentiments. MAGA, if you think you ever had an original idea, an original thought, if this is the first time this has happened, this has all been mapped out, documented in science. What is happening to you now? And someone said, I can't remember, I think it was that CJ guy who's like, that reminds me of the left. Let me help you with the difference. On the left, we can hold people accountable. We can challenge authority. And what I said when I started this was, I wasn't just saying this to draw the parallel to Trump and malignant narcissism. What I'm saying is it will spring up on the left, right? In altruistic movements, bad actors will appear, which I think we saw that last week on the left, right? There was a lot of people being exposed for a lot of horrible behavior. And so but the difference is with the left and what they call right-wing authoritarianism, right? Which is a whole psychological study in itself you can look up, is that there is accountability. You can question authority, right? It might be hard because people can fall under a spell of a malignant narcissism or narcissist on the left, and it can be hard to hold them accountable. But ultimately, the only difference between the left and the right that I can discernibly see is accountability, is questioning authority. MAGA, you can't question your own authority. 24 hours a day, you spread lies and propaganda that are easily disprovable. Why?
We touched on this earlier too, about tyranny, right? And about how I firmly believe, and this is the psyop that's come from the right for decades, that the only tyranny in their mind that would exist would be liberals in charge, right? So their response has always been against a tyrannical government. So you're not going to take my guns because of the tyrannical government. And to what we've broken down today, the tyranny, this economic tyranny, and in dissolving or blurring the lines between the branches of government and erasing the Constitution and eliminating constitutional norms and violating due process rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all know the list. That is true tyranny. And the people in this case, aside from the marginalized communities, because they're always harmed the most, think about the agriculture cuts that we went through earlier and how the impact that we're seeing on small farmers. I know Will did a video over the weekend about how, rural farmers, especially in the Midwest, are just really feeling it now. Like the small family farms are going to be out of business by the end of this month. We know that supply chain, we talked about the symbiotic relationship of freight, global freight, about how there's an expectation and an assumption that cargo ships are going to leave China full, come to the U.S. unloaded, and then exporters from the U.S. will then restock the ships so that they can go out across the world. That's not happening now. 40% on average, global trade is cut by 40%, they're saying. Think about that. Think about the impact it has, and not just what's on the shelf, that's bad enough, but all the little ancillary industries that depend on that, from the small, mechanic operations to those little stores around ports of call and things like this. We haven't even scratched the surface as to how bad it's going to be. And it's all related because, and Felice is going to talk about this later in our show today, the cyber crimes and the crypto fraud, so that the Trump administration is enriching itself. Vietnam, by the way, to avoid some of the penalties of the tariffs, have fast-tracked a new Trump hotel in Vietnam. And MAGA, you guys are fine with that. But her emails. But Hunter Biden. And you guys are fine with that. This is why it's important that we do these shows. Anything else that you'd like to share today, Felice?
Yeah, while I'm sharing it, can we all get facts to 500K really quick? And
do it.
Keep tapping the screen. And again, all of our everything I do, I rely on your tips and donations to keep it going. This is essentially my job. These are my pay apps are Girl Has No Name, Venmo, and Cash App. If you would like to support me, please do. But someone, I think it was Cricket. Hi, Cricket. Who asked, like, what are you reading from? This is all one. And there's hundreds of studies that echo the study that I was just taking you guys through. But I was speaking off one study. If you're in my Discord, I saw that someone asked me earlier, how do we join your Discord? Whether you're listening on Twitch or YouTube or TikTok right now, in my link tree, there's a link to the Discord. Don't click on that link, because for some reason I already replaced it. I replaced it every Sunday, and then it seems like it doesn't work. So copy and paste that link into a browser. This is all from one study. It's called Group Narcissism, a Disease of Capitalism. It's the main author is a guy named Peter Murphy. You can look that up, but in my Discord, I didn't just put it in the general chat. I sent it to everyone. So if you get alerts from me and you're in like one of the almost 1,000 people in my Discord, then I sent it to you. Yeah. All of that. It's 29 pages. That's why I was trying to say, you think MAGA and Trump ever had an original thought in their mind? No. This is just being replicated. This is a disease that is developed from the advent of neoliberalism. Right? So it's called Group Narcissism, a Disease of Capitalism, the author and Peter Murphy. And you can look that up and it will pop up.
This has been great today. I always look forward to these conversations because our brain, I love it. All the synapses are firing. Is there anything that you would like to share in closing? Anything else you want to promote
Kyle
today?
In the comments, I believe, was talking to me, but can't type correctly, and said, Feline, open wide, wider. I don't know why you think misogyny and references to grape or essay are appropriate, Kyle, but I do have a couple extra minutes if you would like to come up here and threaten me personally.
Wow, Kyle. My goodness. Scared, soft, and weak.
Waiting, Kyle.
Intimidated.
But my guess is that you are an impotent, terrified, tiny little man who will do nothing of the sort.
Yeah, you and your micro.
I'm waiting, Kyle.
Corner, Kyle.
Kyle, I don't see you requesting. Where are you, Kyle? Say it to my face. Degrade me to my face. I'm sorry that your brain is small and you have a deep sense of insecurity that makes you feel threatened by women whose brains are firing on all cylinders. There's nothing I can do. I can suggest therapy.
He ran.
Oh, Kyle, you're gone? It's so strange. I'm so surprised that Kyle doesn't want to come up here and say that.
I think Paul had a quick question for us before we head out today. Kyle. Sorry about that, Felice. I know you're used to it, but still. Hey, Paul.
How are you? Yes,
Well,
Kyle is an insecure little man who peaked in middle school and was picked last in kickball. That's his base. That's
Indeed.
very
Indeed.
it is. I have a
Indeed.
question for you, Felice. In this time of talking about the French Revolution and looking back to France of May of 1968 and the national protest during the Cold War when they broke away from the Soviet Union, is there anything less than a national labor strike that's going to change the corruption of this country, in your opinion?
I am on generalstrike.us. We are gathering people. We need a critical mass of, I believe, 13 million people. But if we're talking about, I think I get where you're going, Paul. Outside of like acts of civil disobedience, which I think protesting is
Malicious
becoming
compliance.
like a hobby of everyone, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But like, we have two levers of power out because we're not overpowering the American military, which is being deployed on U.S. soil at this point in different ways. So I think that would be either a general strike, or which it's not general strike is a critical mass of people. I think we're looking for 13 million, right? Like
3.5%.
3.5% to stop working, or right. The other lever of power we have is to stop consuming.
That's
Yeah.
a good one.
What would you ask for that national strike? And I'm asking this because I actually have an appointment. I have a meeting with Swallow on Thursday, and he's willing to talk about this with me.
That's amazing. Eric Swalwell was the only person I did a little piece on him. I like his style.
He's a good guy. We went to the same school.
Terrorizing Kevin Kiley.
Yeah, what would be, so was the question, Paul, what would the ask of him be and how to support it? I'd say promote it, for one. I mean,
what would you want from the strike? Like, what are the demands? What would you like? Obviously, impeaching the orange guy, reversing Citizens United. What would the demands be if you were to pick a perfect list of things in the strike? What would those things be?
I wouldn't make it about politics. I'd make it more economics. I wouldn't talk about impeachment on the labor strike. I would make it about a livable wage. I would talk about expansion of family leave, maternal, paternal leave. I would talk about, increased protections at work. Don't forget, they want to go away. They want to do away with OSHA. I would make it about economic. I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't use that form, at least for me. I wouldn't use that format to introduce articles of impeachment. I would make it about economics. Felice?
Well, I mean, the point of the general strike is to restore power to the people, right? Like, it's not about necessarily gaining leverage. It's about, hey, there's a way in which the U.S. is supposed to function. Like, appropriations are supposed to go through Congress, right? It's about Donald Trump ceding power and allowing the checks and balances of the government to work. Like, do I think that through the general strike, people are necessarily going to have, anybody is going to grow a spine in Congress and overcome Trump? No, not necessarily. It's about gaining the basic human rights and the things that were appropriated by Congress that people need to live.
So what things, if you were to put, so if you were to pick 3 to 4 things, what would they specifically be in your opinion?
I mean, I would demand, again, if I'm thinking about this on the spot, if I had more time to think about it, I would say I would be demanding an increase of federal minimum wage.
Okay.
I think that would be a good place to start. I would be demanding, I don't want small bites of the apple when it comes to expansion of the ACA. I want universal health care. I want to demand it. And I think corporations should pay more in taxes, pay their fair share.
Okay.
Felice?
But like, my feeling is like, okay, all of those things I completely agree with, but at this point that's delusional because what's happening is the erosion of things that have already been appropriated legally by Congress, right?
That's
like, so as we see authoritarianism take over and the power consolidated in the executive branch, I see it as like a relinquishing of authoritarian control, right? Like, I mean, yeah, I want universal health care, but like also I just want him to acknowledge Congress who's appropriated money.
Yeah,
that is right now keeping people alive.
That may be a good one, Paul. How about just follow the law? Stop sending money to El Salvador.
Would you put in there to reverse Citizens United so it removes the dark money and all these politicians from buying seats?
Sure. We'll never have, but how is that? Like, that's not going, we're not going to strike and get money out of politics. We need Congress to change laws. to do that.
That's
and right
a lot
now we're in a
progressives.
situation where Trump is not acknowledging Congress exists. So
Right.
of course,
or the courts.
I think we
Or the
want,
courts.
or the federal judiciary whose job is to place limitations on the executive branch. So like, I think like it's the cart before the horse.
Okay.
Good luck.
All right.
Let us know how it goes. I mean, I
will.
think any of the above,
Followed you.
I think would work.
Oh, thanks.
You know, I appreciate you, buddy.
All right,
thanks
guys,
a lot
see ya.
for jumping in today.
Bye.
See you later. Well, this has been great. I hope you guys really appreciate the amount of work that Felice put into this and the education for this particular live. You know, we went through the budget, we went through economic narcissism, and we know what we're up against, friends. Again, we the people, this is a moment. Any words in closing, Felice? And thank you again for getting up so damn early and doing so much work. And I'm sorry about people like Kyle. They're out there everywhere.
Oh yeah, I just like to call it out publicly, like men who imply I should be raped or whatever it is you're trying to say, Kyle. I just like to point out that you are spineless and won't say it to my face. None of you ever will. That's the thing about incels. Anyways, no, thank you for having me. I always appreciate coming on this platform and having these like high level conversations. I was super excited to do this and I'm glad I didn't know how it was all going to come together, but I think it gelled quite nicely. So thank you guys all. And then thank you so much, Andy. You're amazing. And then I'll be live at 11:30 Pacific time for the People's Receipts, where I'll go to things of this nature, more into crypto corruption and other things. So please join me there, and we'll see you guys again next Monday for another episode of Facts and Felice, and tomorrow night for 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern for
Correct.
the
What are you fighting?
virtual town hall series
Fighting
we're doing.
for, yes, exactly. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Again, thank you, friend, for getting up so early. Appreciate you guys. We're going to rate our friend Johnny P. You guys know Johnny Palmadesi does.
Love
the
Johnny.
basic
Tell
bag.
Johnny Felice said hi.